Hello, everybody. Good morning, happy lunchtime, or good evening to you, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Alice Wyatt, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. And our webinar title is How to Manufacture a Better Customer Experience. So just before we start, here's a quick overview of what to expect today. So we'll kick off with an introduction to our speakers, set the scene with a brief overview, and then we'll get to the fun part. So I will be interviewing our two speakers around B2B digital transformation and their top tips and tricks for anyone facing a similar journey. So quick housekeeping questions. If you've got any questions after the webinar, I left my email at the end of the presentation, so feel free to drop me a note afterwards and I'll get back to you. And we will make the recording available for you afterwards. So to introduce you to our speakers. Firstly, we are lucky to have with us Sunny Vallavarapu from Bosch Power Tools. Sunny has quite a big job. He is driving the development and execution of the digital strategy for Bosch Power Tools in North America. So this includes their ambitious digital transformation project they're undergoing. He also manages a large team, and if his LinkedIn endorsements are anything to go by, he is also a charismatic and well-known man in the industry. So thank you for joining us, Sunny. We are very lucky to have you here. We're also lucky to have with us Randy Cole, Head of Marketing from Gorilla. Gorilla is part of the One-on-One Commerce Group, and they're a Forrester-recognized commerce agency who specialize in helping B2B and B2C companies define and create their digital commerce experiences. And finally, I'll keep this short. My name is Alice Wyatt. I'm Director of Partner Marketing at Bloomreach, and as you can probably tell from my accent, I work in our London office. Bloomreach, very quick overview, is a software vendor, and we're helping companies to compete with the Goliath of Amazon and its counterparts. So we have an experience platform with two applications, a CMS that is API driven and allows people to create content really easily and personalize it across touchpoints. And the second part of our platform is an AI-powered search and merchandising application. So it shows visitors the right products they want to buy at the right time. So these two combined increase online revenue and give customers a really good experience, so they keep coming back to a brand. So hopefully that's a high-level introduction to all of our speakers today. And now we are on to the good stuff. Let's start the introduction. So briefly, why are we here today? Why are we focusing on customer experience in B2B? And frankly, why was there so much demand for this topic in this webinar? You'll all be aware of the shifts we're seeing in B2B, which is being mirrored closely by the journey that B2C has also experienced. Amazon is encroaching on the space. They are taking market share aggressively, and companies are struggling to compete. If you take a closer look at Amazon and what they're up to, they're really winning based on two things. They're winning based on price, and they're winning based on convenience. The savvy companies have identified a space where Amazon are not winning, building a holistic experience for shoppers that engages them, makes them feel part of something, educates them, and really fosters brand loyalty. Therefore, what's kicked off is a drive to digital transformation to create these compelling experiences that are going to help them compete. Companies are all embarking on some kind of digital journey, as I'm sure many of you are on this call. It's often hard to know, though, where to begin and how to prioritize. Sometimes it's also a challenge to make a cultural shift to reach these goals. Safe to say we're all inching our way out of the fax machine era, but I'm really pleased that we have Sunny here today to tell us the interesting real story of Bosch Power Tools digital transformation and the strides they've taken, the decisions they've made and the key learnings so far. So without further ado, let's dive into our first question. Sunny and Randy, hello. So for our first question, hello, welcome. Hello, both of you. So for our first question, Sunny, could you please introduce yourself briefly, tell us a bit more about your role, and then it'd be really great if you could tell us a bit more about the challenges you were facing before your transformation and what you were hoping to achieve.
No, that sounds good, thanks. So my role within the Power Tools group within Bosch is part of the global digital team. So some of the challenges we faced over the last few years has been really how do we kind of go at transformation? And transformation isn't just digital for Bosch or Power Tools itself, it's the whole organization. And so we have various paths kind of working throughout the organization, and whether this is sales transformation or brand marketing transformation, manufacturing 4.0, digital transformation is one of many that are all kind of running parallel to each other. And so I would say our biggest struggle in years past is actually digital just trying to kind of engage and kind of being pushed into the organization. However, just that occurring in itself was just never truly successful. I think you mentioned it earlier when you said culture. I think transformation for us has really started, I bucket it in three groups. I mean, first is really what's the organization structure around it, and not just digital, but the other groups that we work with. And inherently, when it's digital, you're working with the whole organization. And so one team can't be transforming unless the others are kind of adapting around it, and vice versa. The second is culture. I mean, the culture of how digital is kind of changing things and how you're engaging your customers. And so how everybody's job is generally changing and kind of shifting, and digital is, let's say, forcing that. And then third is technology. And I think in the past, our problems has been generally pushing technology without the organization and or the culture around it. And I think that's really what has shifted. And so when I started saying Global Digital Unit, this is a group that was formed 2 years this April within Power Tools. It is a large group of digital-minded individuals with digital focus around the world and in a single team. And so regardless of what region, you will find a Global Digital Unit team that'll support in projects and operations from a global perspective, as well as a very regional or country-specific, brand country-specific perspective. And so I am part of the digital team. I just happen to be in North America, focusing on the US and Canada. However, there is counterparts around the world. This is something that didn't exist before. This is something where we're very siloed and very regional. And it was really hard to align globally, because if you look at certain topics, and whether it be kind of a CMS, B2C or B2B type topic, these are topics that lived within many groups of the organization, and they were different in every region. And so aligning globally was nearly impossible. And the forming of the digital unit was really the precipice and kind of kickoff, and really the acceleration of our transformation, which is somewhere around 2 years now.
Fantastic. And just going into a little bit more about the aims of this team, what were you hoping to create?
To be honest, I don't know exactly what the hope was at the time. We knew we had problems, and so I think it was moving forward, not trying to set up the ideal setup that is perfect and something that never changes again, but actually it was a recognition that globally Power Tools couldn't function from a digital perspective if we weren't working all together. And so this was breaking down silos, changing the organization around it, and grouping people together to actually allow decisions to be made very quickly. Because when you're talking, especially in B2B, it isn't about just a single CMS. It's actually about the 20 systems that support it. And those systems and tools around the world generally have to be somewhat similar. Otherwise, it gets quite difficult. How do you support your users at a country level and still align globally has been the struggle. And the de facto fault was always, we can't follow the global rule or the global plan because it doesn't meet our users' needs. And then we would go off very country or regionally specific. And so the goal was really to stop that and say we have to work together globally. It's the only way we'll be able to scale this, and that going off regionally was no longer beneficial, and that we had to kind of give an infrastructure and a baseline of technology systems, processes for the world to follow to help accelerate the regionality and the regional needs. And so it was a win-win type situation. It wasn't about taking control. It was about actually helping accelerate the organization, regardless of what country you are, giving you the control you need to actually meet your users in those countries, which is, let's say, generally a concern, while still following what a global footprint or global roadmap should look like.
Okay, that's interesting. I bet there are lots of people on this call today who wanted to form similar groups internally. Thank you. That leads us actually nicely on to our next question. So you sort of touched on the fact that you've got different territories running on different systems and different commerce platforms. What were the content limitations of your commerce platforms? You mentioned you're trying to kind of create an experience. Were these commerce platforms enabling that, or was that a challenge?
To be honest, it's probably easier to name off the benefits and the positives because the list of limitations are large. Within one country, let's say just the United States, depending if you just look at all our infrastructure and all our applications, and when we may say Bosch and we may say Power Tools, but we have various brands, and so this is Bosch, it's Dremel, CST Berger, there's Rotozip. We have multiple brands in each country. And so when we think content, actually, we start thinking by brand first, then we think by country, then there's language to be considered, and then B2B is a grouping of those brands. And so organizationally, we just generally have some limitations because each country is somewhat different. We have different brands and different languages. It's hard to reuse a lot of assets. It may be Bosch Blue only in the U.S., but there's Bosch Blue and Bosch Green in Europe. And then there's skill in Latin America, but no skill in the United States. And so we generally just have some organizational struggles just on how the Power Tools group is set up and just different. And that's fine. The limitations we start running into is that we don't have consistency in our infrastructure. And so there's very few platforms that are actually on the same system. And so when you don't have the same CMS, you simply start running into the basic issues of all the content you create is created in silos and loaded in silos, and you have no efficiencies to share because it becomes very difficult to share. And then you also are really kind of stuck in a monolithic kind of infrastructure or system. And so when you're building inside of CMSs or platforms itself, it's hard to build for one brand in one region and find an easy path to take that and put that in another region. And so our limitations are kind of started by us and then made worse by the need of we have to move forward, we need a new site, we need a new application. It's too easy, or it's generally easier just to actually grab another CMS or grab whatever is the easiest in front of us and just stand up the system. However, in the end, we can look back and say, we can't scale that. It's inefficient to manage and it's costly. And it doesn't benefit, it barely benefits the region. The effort and time does not benefit Power Tools globally. And so we have a huge opportunity, is what we ended up looking at.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That leads us nicely on to our next question, which is for Randy. Randy, Sunny's hinted at this, but headless commerce has become something, or the headless approach has become, more and more talked about. It's gaining momentum in the marketplace. At a high level, can you explain what headless commerce is and why brands are opting for this?
Well, I'll give it a shot. It's obviously a very complex topic, and personally, this is my point of view. Headless was maybe not the best term. Doesn't really do the concept justice. Really, API-driven commerce would be more accurate in my view, but that's a battle for another day. Really, headless at the highest level is taking a decentralized approach to building the customer experience. So rather than having a tightly integrated back end and front end that have to move in lockstep with each other, comes with a lot of limitations. Headless, the back end or application layer, this would include the commerce engine, and the front end or presentation layer, which would include the CMS, are untethered. So instead, APIs are used, and the API calls are set up to basically pass content, product, customer data back and forth between the systems. What this allows is a degree of flexibility that's, pretty unprecedented until the last couple of years or so. Solves a lot of issues that Sunny alluded to their team was having globally. Really gives complete flexibility to the user experience you present on the front end while not being slowed down by potential limitations within the back end. So, why is that, appealing to a lot of brands? Well, a lot of the flexibility is certainly one thing. The ability to iterate and launch faster is certainly something in this day and age that's appealing to a lot of brands. A lot of companies can't afford to take 9 to 12 months to get a site stood up and then immediately have to start reiterating on that. It's also really ideal for this omni-channel world we live in, where traditional e-commerce transactions are just one of the many ways that customers are engaging with brands. So, that's just part of the real appeal of headless that we're seeing, in the marketplace.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So, Sunny, as I understand, Bosch Power Tools is in the process of adopting a headless approach. Can you explain how you came to this decision strategically?
So, to kind of lead off what Randy was saying, so I think headless actually, and I agree, it's not the best name for it. It changed the thought process, and services and APIs is actually really the foundation for it. You can imagine a power tools company selling tools in, 50, 60 countries. When we talk about different CMSs, you can imagine almost every system to some degree is somewhat different. And so I think for years it's been how do you harmonize the back end? How do you make every system the same in every country? And then you end up with this conversation or argument about, well, the front end features and functionalities need to be different for every user in every country. And so we can get every system the same, but then we're kind of stuck with the same front end and the same, let's say, lack of personalization or kind of regionality that's always needed. And so headless, I think, started in the commerce space and then quickly, to where Bloomreach is from a CMS space, was really disconnecting those conversations. And so changing the thought process. And the thought process, I think, used to be, well, you want to do commerce, do you need this system? Because this is the system for the global tool that you want to build it on. Or you need this CMS to do it because that's the CMS for your brand website. And that was kind of the traditional, system-driven approach with microservices and services. Headless now to me means more. It's really about the feature and functionality, and it's completely irrelevant almost actually what system it comes from. That around the world we all actually generally want the same features, and that whether B2C is the perfect example. In a B2C space, you can pick a brand and you can talk to every country and every region and every brand manager there, and they'll tell you the 100 things they want, and 90% of it's actually the same. And it's about the feature that's actually the same. The design is irrelevant. The style is just a style guide. Let's ignore that piece of the conversation. And then when you look at, somebody wants to do commerce, in the end, as long as there's a service for commerce, or as long as there's a service for product content, or there's a service for personalization, or a service for registering a tool or triggering an email, you just need a service for this, and you actually don't need to change the systems that exist in those regions. You may need a system in that region, and that's actually the easiest part. But you can actually disconnect those conversations, and you can actually make it a more manageable approach, because you can just say, well, we have a custom front end. We can all share this around the world. This custom front end is not required that the back end exists, or the back end is the same. We just need services to power it. And that every region can use the system that makes the most sense. Maybe what they have, maybe the new system that they want to pilot, or maybe a system that really is required in one country or one region for us, and then brings limited value to Europe or Latin America. In the end, if I need a service for reviews, it doesn't matter what system actually is powering that from a front-end perspective. If we can microservice or service enable it in a headless approach, we've changed the conversation. And now we can actually align saying, hey, we can align on all the features we want globally, because this, nobody will argue. A blog's a blog. It might be a little bit left or right, and depending on the country you're in, but we don't need to build 400 blogs. We need to build a blog feature and functionality. And then we can customize the style very quickly. And if we want to enhance it, we can enhance it for the globe, not just one country. And at the same time, a country can enhance it themselves for something very specific. I think, I don't know how this conversation progressed to this point, to be honest. I think it was always a service-enabled conversation on, how do we use our third-party systems with the infrastructure we have? How do we use third-party SaaS providers via APIs to provide value and solve problems? And so I think we were always just firefighting, grabbing systems to provide a feature to a website. And this progressed from a headless commerce to a headless CMS to just a headless approach. very quickly, because I think it was clearly seen on how does it bring value from a development, from a cost, from a scale perspective. And I think the most important part, it's just pure speed, because you can't, changing out back-end systems will take years, and by the time you do it, you have to do it again. And I think it was just a realization that, how do we move forward quickly while we change out the back end without saying we have to wait. And so this was, in the end, I would say it's a win-win, but I mean, this is the best approach. And I think generally speaking to different agencies, to different partners, to different developers, they'll all agree with it because you're not building this monolithic kind of animal that's hard to manage, but you're actually just able to move quickly, efficiently. You're getting scale, and you don't have to worry about the back-end system.
Okay, fantastic. So you're in the process of adopting Bloomreach's digital experience platform, which has embedded within it a headless CMS. How does using a platform like Bloomreach play into the approach you're taking, your philosophy, and how is it going to help you reach your goals?
It's flexibility. I mean, to me, it's we have too many CMSs, to be honest. We need a platform. We need features. We need a feature of displaying content. We need a feature of controlling and managing content. We need personalization as a feature. We need management and operations. We needed to be able to develop. So all of this, from a Bloomreach perspective, this is where it fits in perfectly to me, because it's not necessarily only a CMS conversation. I mean, in the end, it's an application discussion, and that there isn't an application that we build that doesn't have some sort of CMS features or functionalities, use cases that we have to provide. Some applications are very, very minimal. Some are, like a brand website is very heavy, and so in a headless approach, we need a solution that can run the gamut, and that we want a solution that can build a true engaging brand website for millions of users, and do so very regionally and personalized by country and language and brand. At the same time, we need to do it for one-off small applications. We need to do it in B2B. We need to do it across the organization. And this is our opportunity in a project run by our central team, where we can actually move towards putting all our brands on one infrastructure from a Power Tools perspective, and say we have a global CMS for the Power Tools brand websites, and that we can build features at a global scale while giving regionality full control. And so going, to the headless approach, I mean, Bloomreach becomes the center in the B2C brand websites. There's a dozen other systems that are really involved and needed to kind of power a B2C experience. And if you looked at our global landscape, it's not actually a dozen, it's probably 30. And there's a lot of overlap because the systems are different by country or region. However, seeing Bloomreach doesn't care because it's a service and it's just powering a feature. And the front end doesn't care because it's just a service and a feature being powered by a back-end system. It can help us normalize. It can actually take away some of the pains on having different back-end systems, and we can actually build a feature and then replicate it for different regions very quickly to connect it to the different back-end system that may exist in that country. Or the standard feature works if that feature exists. And so this is an opportunity, not just from a B2C perspective, but just a general Power Tools perspective, to actually move forward in headless. Because in headless, I mean, when it started in commerce, it was really commerce driven around ordering. There was still a gap around CMS. And so I think this is where Bloomreach fits in.
Perfect. Thank you, Sunny. Sunny, we're going to give you a rest now and move over to Randy. Randy, we've got another question for you. So, see, Sunny's spoken about creating a front-end user experience. Are there any special considerations that you could share with us for creating that front-end user experience when you're taking a headless commerce approach?
Sure. So, when we're taking this headless approach, the UI elements are not coupled to objects in the back end. So in theory, the sky is the limit. This is extremely liberating. But if you step back a minute, it can seem a little daunting, right? Because you have the ability to create a completely custom UI to best fit the business and what you're trying to accomplish within a given site, within a given page or section of the website. And this is, as opposed to adapting a predefined element within a platform to try to best fit a need. You really have this complete flexibility, right? So you can, but you don't have to start from scratch. And in fact, I'd recommend probably not starting, from scratch every time. So the way we've approached this at Gorilla, we have a creative technology team, and what we've done is create a build kit. And what that is, it really consists of hundreds of pre-built UI components that can be assembled together and then customized as needed to fit a given, use case or experience. So, for instance, on a product page, if we're trying to drive conversion, we can customize a UI from that, again, using some components that were pre-built and assembled, and then taking it the last step of the way to really fit the brand, the localization in terms of, language to fit different languages, different types of imagery, things like that. Or we can build a section of the site to really drive engagement if we're looking to inform, inspire, or educate an end user. So all of that really needs to be considered thoughtfully and strategically, but the flexibility, and I would recommend using user testing along the way to kind of gut check what you're doing, but it really allows to create these really highly focused experiences across the entire journey of the customer.
Thank you, Randy. Randy, we've got one more question for you, and then two more questions for Sunny, and then we're done. So the next question for you, Randy, how do you integrate the digital experience layer, that's front-end layer, and the commerce platforms together so that you have this seamless end-to-end customer experience?
Yeah, so really what you're not really so much integrating is connecting, the application layer and the presentation layer, since, headless is an API-centric approach. What this means, and Sunny alluded to this in one of his previous answers just a few minutes ago, is you can have any number of systems in the back end, commerce, personalization, search. They can be added to the application or back end and plugged in or fed into the presentation layer via API calls, right? If you're taking the microservices approach, which Sunny also talked about, one system going down doesn't take down the whole system, or one enhancement to a system doesn't, really affect the entire experience. Kind of an analogy that you can kind of get your head around was in the old days, if you've been around long enough, you might remember Windows 98, and if something went wrong, you saw the blue screen of death. Now, if a single portion of the system fails or you're upgrading your merchandising, you don't have to take down the whole site, or the whole site doesn't, disrupt just because of that. So really a lot of extra flexibility there. And kind of, before I took over marketing side of at Gorilla, I led our content and digital marketing team for 8 years. And one of the issues we used to have back, once upon a time, was trying to integrate both a commerce platform and a CMS on the front end. And we would have things like top-level navigation not matching, or how do you make an update in one and not the other, or passing logged-in states and cart, totals and so on and so forth. A lot of those were, pretty big challenges for us. With a headless approach using microservices, a lot of that can be factored out of the equation and really, allow the experience to lead the way, and the back end supporting it as broadly as necessary. Hope that answers your question.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Randy. Randy, your section is done. You can relax. We've got two more questions left for Sunny. Sunny, let me go to the next slide. So, third-party retailers like Amazon are a significant part of your strategy, as I understand it, at Bosch Power Tools. But as we've talked about, they don't necessarily deliver that complete brand experience. So can you discuss how the digital experience you've created complements these other sales channels?
I'd say we're in a similar space as many manufacturers. I mean, Amazon is a key partner and drives a large percent of volume and has a lot of eyes from our consumers, whether they purchase from Amazon or go to other retailers or big box stores. And so what I think Amazon has forced, especially in B2B, and we talk about it in a B2B project that we're actively working on, is the features and functionalities that we need in a B2B experience is no longer the basic features that we needed just to process an order. It's really changing how the users who inherently are using Amazon and other brand websites, their expectations when they actually engage us as a brand. And so, when I say if a user is used to recommendation engines or used to a return process as simple as Amazon, that is the baseline from a brand perspective that we must now meet, fortunately and unfortunately, because that's what they get in their day-to-day lives. And when we're different than that, and we're harder than that, like most manufacturers and most companies, there's friction there. And so we have to strive to meet that. And so whether this is some of those basic features on a website, I think is where everybody starts with. Where I think we also kind of shift and are focusing on as well is that there's various services and processes and engagements and touch points that we have with our users that Amazon will never, and they don't need to. It's not their focus. We need to provide value back to our customers and our users in various avenues, and digital is driving that. And so features and functionalities you may be used to on Uber or Lyft or Amazon, you name it, those are shifting into the brands, and they're shifting into manufacturers and companies for us to figure out how can we engage through our channels, whether it's direct through Amazon to our partner, to our users, to our other distributors, to our customers, to our users. We have to find ways to better support our user base and our customers, because that's the expectations of them. And we have to strive to meet it. Otherwise, they will find somebody who will. And so I see that, that ends up blurring the line between B2C and B2B. And we start to now see those struggles in those conversations, because at some point, that conversation goes away and it's just engaging, and it just happens to be a different user or a different persona.
You touched on very direct sales. What are your plans for you increasing that channel, or what are your plans for driving direct sales within the overall sales mix?
So if you ask 100 people within Power Tools, I'm guessing you're going to get 100 different answers. And so this is really more my opinion on it. Direct sales, I think, has a place, and I think it's only going to grow. I think what is going to change over the next few years is what is sales. And because that's different, or it's a fairly simple topic when it's B2C, somebody just buying something. In B2B, our distributors are key and our focus, and so sales could be inherently just supporting their sale. Sales is maybe more of a supportive role than actually the financial transaction. From a brand perspective, each brand has a different view, and that view changes by country, because the users are different in every country and how they engage and their expectations. If Amazon's not there, or direct to consumer commerce is not a big topic in various countries in Latin America, but pushing in others, I think it's going to be driven by our users. In the end, we need to be where our customers are. And I think that's a valid statement no matter what country you're in. And so if a country is driving for it and there is a need to support the users, and it makes sense that we can do so and provide value, I think we absolutely should. At the same time, we can't be if we build it, they will come type of approach, because we can't go direct unless we can give a better experience than the other people in the market. And so going direct and trying to compete with Amazon is something everybody generally fails at, and as a manufacturer will be no difference. So it's really about supporting our users more than it is about, let's say, just going direct as a conversation anymore.
Thank you very much. Sunny, your final question. This is what everyone's been waiting for. What is the secret to success? Joking aside, could you tell us any tips or advice you'd give to companies who are embarking on or continuing their digital transformation?
Wow. Everybody seems to be at a different phase. And so I've talked to some companies and friends that really surprised that they're just starting kind of a digital transformation, and I'm surprised how they're starting it. and then quickly realized that we were there just 2-3 years ago. And so I think globally everybody's moving. I think every country, region, and company is different. For a company the size of Bosch, and this is happening outside of just power tools, but a company with 420,000 employees globally, trying to transform globally, I thought would take a lot longer than it has. So I am very surprised and very happy that it has moved at the pace it has. Just within our digital group, we're on the 3rd or 4th iteration within 2 years. And so it wasn't about setting something in stone and just moving forward. It was actually setting something and then adapting it along the way. I think, there are many people are generally happy with the idea of moving forward and change. Unfortunately, a lot of people are not. And I think what everybody will feel, no matter where you are in this process, is there's a level of uncertainty that the whole organization will feel at one point, and that some people don't get past it. And so I think it's something to be wary of and cognizant of, and it's also something to get in front of, because once the change starts, I don't know when it ends, and nor should it. And I think this is part of just iterating and being faster and kind of changing and adapting, because you're really just going to learn from your first step. And so wherever you are, I think you felt a lot of this pain. Misery loves company, and a lot of us are with you. And I think if you're just starting and a little panicked by it, I would generally panic you more by saying there's more to come and you just don't see it yet. And that you have to just be open to it. Because if you're going to fight it, you're generally not going to stay there too long. And you're fighting against something that actually is positive. And that you can look at another organization and you can find maybe an easy way out. But every organization is going through this. They're going through it at a different pace, a different scale, and they're in a different spot at the moment. But I think this is the new norm for the next 3 to 5 years at least. And maybe there's a point where things kind of settle down, but I think this is just a ramping up point when it comes to digital transformation.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. That is the end of our live Q&A. Sunny and Randy, thank you very much for your insights. Pretty impressive to see a company with such a complex structure and a complex offering, frankly, really push through these challenges to great results. So thank you for sharing your insights. And finally, to our audience, thank you very much for your participation. We've had people joining from all over the world, which is really amazing. And it's encouraging to have lots of people on this webinar, and it's really testament to Bosch Power Tools' interesting story. So as I said at the start, if you have any remaining questions, whether you're watching live or on demand, please reach out to me on my email or contact Gorilla with the details on this slide. Thank you very much. Thanks to everybody, and have a very lovely day.